Jai Bharat, Jai Hind, welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. We are coming close to the 1 year anniversary of the Ukraine war, although it is not something to be celebrated about, but something to be analyzed as to what is happening in that country and what course of this war the future will take. We need to look at it with a little bit of an indifference to kind of understand the ground realities of that place, cutting the clutter from what we hear in the media. To do just that, I have someone really special with me for the first time on Dev Talks, Major General Prabdeep Singh Bahel, someone who knows what he's talking about when he's talking about these kind of strategic issues, Ukraine, and of course certain other topics that we will cover in the future. Sir, thank you so much and welcome to the show for the first time on Dev Talks.
Thank you very much. Adi, I'm indeed privileged to be on board, and it's a pleasure to be with you and to talk about Ukraine, which is today, as you said, nearing its first year. Something which we got to watch, something which is intriguing the rest of the world, something that all of us are intently seeing, studying. Most of us do not know the direction in which it is going. Notwithstanding, it's a continuous watch. You got to keep a watch on it because the future world is going to be shaped by the outcome of this war. And that is something very important that we got to see. I have a very different take on this war. You know, I don't see it as a NATO Russian rivalry. I see it in a different perspective. If you go back and you see, there was a time about a couple of years back, and we were talking about the European Union coming up with its own defense strategy, and they wanted kind of NATO out. NATO was always there and questioning. He says NATO. They were always the United States. In fact, was always talking about the EU is not doing enough for NATO. And when the moment EU turned around and said, okay, fine, thank you very much, I think we will go in for our own defense force, and they started talking about it in a serious manner, the Americans felt, you mean to say you were telling us to get out of European continent? And that is where the worry started. If you recollect, NATO had started. We had all started questioning NATO. The Atlantic Alliance. This alliance was not required because Russia was not a threat in the true sense to anybody in the West. Imagine NATO without the United States. It doesn't exist. The rest of the countries that you see in the European continent, in Europe, well, they do have, barring Britain and barring France and Germany to an extent, you do not have much forces other than the United States. That the punch behind NATO is the United States Army and the armed forces, not the army. I would say more of land, air forces and the maritime forces. So that is where I think the thought process changed. Americans started feeling that they were losing relevance. The Europeans were getting convinced that they wanted to defend or be capable of defending themselves. So, in my opinion, which may be divergent, Ukraine was invented. How do you justify the American presence on European soil? How do you justify the Americans having a hold on Europe? Had Ukraine not taken place, had this confrontation not been engineered, if I may say so, definitely the United States was losing its importance, its The very fact that it needed to be in Europe was being put into, it was coming straightforward. So Ukraine, so trying to push Russia into a corner, no buffer zone, support Ukraine, train Ukraine, and they started doing it long time back. And it is not just that it is 2022 that they thought of it. This thing has been happening since 2014, if I'm not wrong. And their entire intent was to come down to the borders of Russia, deploy the missiles, their forces at the border of Russia. What are you inviting? You are inviting a reaction, and the reaction did come. And all the while, we know that President Putin was, saying, just please ensure that Ukraine is not a part of NATO. That was the red line. That's what has happened. Now, how does it proceed further? Let's see. I mean, I, if you look at the war, the way it's progressing, uh, urban warfare, warfare is a totally different story. And this is not Iraq and this is not Afghanistan, where the Americans followed the shock and awe tactics, and you expect the Russians to have followed the same tactics. Shock and awe wouldn't have worked here. Russia was not interested in destroying Ukraine. We are very clear of that. When the Russians came in initially, I mean, when it was launched on February the 24th, 22, the Russians marched in. They did not march in with the intent of destroying property or killing people. This is all that what is happening today is an aftermath of the support that the Ukrainian people were given, or I would say, the cheering up which was being done for Ukraine by the Americans as also the uh, NATO countries. Had this cheering up not been done, had this support not been provided, had this 24.9 billion not been given worth of arms by the Americans to the Ukrainians, trust me, there would have been a solution by now. Well, that's gone. That's the past. We're not looking at that now. What we're looking at is, I'm Russia. I want a buffer zone. I do not want the Americans or the NATO forces next to me. I have to, for existence, capture territory, hold on to it, and ensure that it's not my territory tomorrow. Tomorrow, when it goes, it's not my territory. So that territory is that buffer zone that he is trying to capture. And if I were him, or if I were to do it, and if I were to analyze it, I would like to go up to the river line, Dnipro, north south. Today we are talking Donbass. We're only talking Donbass and restricting ourselves to Donbass. Fine. That would be the initial aim. Donbass, fine. And I've got Russian population, and I have popularity there, and I have strength there. I must capture there and consolidate as the first step. But what would be the ultimate aim? Ultimate aim would be to split Ukraine into two, hold the eastern part, and let the left part, the western part be uh, whatever it wants to be, neutral or NATO. So that's the way I look at it. When it comes to the Black Sea, obviously I don't want them to be having access to Odessa. So till I capture Odessa, I'm not going to stop. If you look at the map of Ukraine, you'll find Odessa on the south and towards the west. And there is a small portion, that is a small portion of Ukraine, which is between Moldova and the sea. Well, I need that. I need a strip. I need about 100 odd kilometers north of the sea that I must capture, Odessa and Gulf. So I'm not going to stop. So if that is what if I were to do it. Unfortunately, it's a slogging match,
Mm.
and it will always be a slogging match. Perhaps if India was to do it, I may just put it, if we had to apply our own tactics, we would not go into a slogging match in the cities. We would cut off the cities and go to the next. So perhaps their appreciation or their tactical uh, or the strategy that they're applying needs a little bit of refinement. So they are involved in a what do you call a slog match.
Mhm.
Let's see how it takes place.
Thank you so much, sir. That's a great introduction, if I may, to the problem at hand, if I may, to analyze. But sir, I'd like to ask you one thing. The tactics that the Russians had used, which you described to be a low-handed tactics, non-shock and awe, if I may, was that considered to be the Russian weakness by the West?
You see, what has happened is Russia came with a different intent. When you go in, and if it's your own people, if it's your own, if you feel that you need, they are aligned to you. There is no need to cause any shock by destruction. They were not looking at that. This is not Iraq or this is not Afghanistan, where there was no potent force. There was no direct there were no direct land borders. You were fighting from continental, you know, US and few bases across the world, and you were wanting to destroy that particular place before you sent in land forces. So this is shock and all not applicable here. And these people did not come with the intent of killing, stroke, causing destruction. It may have been looked at a weakness, but it definitely is not a weakness. Uh, I would say, there were noble intents as far as the public, the human life is concerned, as also the public at large is concerned. Whereas now it's a different story. I mean, obviously, if you're going to, if you're going to, I come in with a intent. I wouldn't say, I would not say unprepared. It would be wrong to say unprepared. It was perhaps a wrong reading of the situation, a wrong understanding of the fact that the Ukrainians would get this much of support. So they failed in assessing the correct picture, the ground picture. Definitely, they did not factor in the, I would say, the international interference that they would have to face. This definitely was lacking in them. Yeah.
That one could say about both the sides as well, sir. I don't think the West also saw people sitting on the fence, especially India.
Yes, they did not see India sitting on the fence. Definitely not. And the West did not see, they did not realize that there are people in this world. You know, Actually, largely the major part of the world is not with them. So, if
You're right.
Africa is not with them, if Africa is not with them, if China is not with them, if Russia
India.
itself, of course, is not with them, if there are people who are neutral or so busy and engrossed in themselves that they are not contributing and they're not interested, perhaps. So the West also failed to assess that they would get this kind of a resistance, and they thought whatever they do is going to be accepted. Yeah,
Absolutely,
definitely.
absolutely, sir. So now the mobilization happened, and everybody thought that the winter would kind of bring in an offensive. As you said, there's a grinding battle happening in certain cities, Bakhmut. There's the Battle of Vuhledar, which is in the south. There's this. I believe they've launched a small offensive towards the north in Kremenaya, Liman, and
Yes.
Krasny Liman, and all that area. Uh, the what do you see the Russian offensive is going forward, sir? Do you see this big arrow offensive coming across, or do you see these three huge, for the lack of a better word, grinders switching on, which will basically chew everything as they move slowly and steadily forward? How do you see this thing going forward?
Yeah, this particular thing, there are no pincers coming straight forward and driving a wedge. Uh, that's not happening.
Hmm.
It will be a grinding match. When you're talking of the offensive that you're talking, that offensive is definitely not that kind of offensive that we're talking about visualizing. And they're not going to come into that kind of force and drive a wedge and reach a particular area. If they had to do that, perhaps that doesn't seem to be a part of their operational art. Had they wanted to do it, they should have done it a long time back when these guys were ill prepared. They didn't do it.
Hmm.
And somehow now they are into a grinding match in urban warfare and fighting in the cities. It Every day you advance perhaps 100 meters or 200 meters or 300 meters, and that's about it. And whether you have the Wagner group or you have your any forces that you want to bring in, uh, no. So I think they need to reassess their strategy. And if by any chance they actually go in a proper manner, in a proper offensive, a planned offensive, that has to get coupled with air. There has to, only relying on artillery and on the missiles is not going to work. You got to be able to reach deep. You got to start destroying not where you are, but deeper, and then coming backwards. So if they bring in the air, which I think they're holding on to for a later stage, because they want to hold on and preserve their what you call arsenal as well. They don't want to commit everything in the first go. They're looking at what the Americans are going to provide and what's going to happen. Actually, if you look at what the US is providing or the Europeans are providing, also their leftovers.
Yeah.
I mean, which same country would give the best to Ukraine? No ways. Tomorrow, if the war comes to my borders, what do I do? What do I fight with? I'm going to give you something which I can spare, right? Not from my frontline, not my frontline troops, not my frontline equipment. I will give you what I can spare, and that is what they are doing. So perhaps the Russians are watching. They'll see as to whether what kind of tanks come in, what kind of Ukrainians are seeking aircraft, whether the aircraft are going to come in or not. So all this, and now it's a very interesting thing, and I just want to share with you. The West provides Ukraine with aircraft. Will they provide the pilots?
I asked the same question about the tanks as well, sir.
Yeah, the tanks they say they're training and all that, but it's not so simple. Training soldiers in 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I'm so sorry. You remember we have the debate in India, Agniveer. It's 4 years. 4 years is not good enough to train a soldier.
Yeah,
Here
they're
we're
saying
talking 4 5 weeks, and telling a guy to drive a tank. Okay, driving is all right. I've driven a tank. I mean, I'm an infantry guy. I've driven tanks. I've even flown an aircraft, a Sukhoi. But then that doesn't mean that I can fight with it. And I know the tactics. I know how to operate. I know how to communicate. It ain't easy. So you provide the aircraft. Is an American soldier going to, or a pilot going to pilot that aircraft? Or is a German, you know, is he going to pilot or take on the Leopard and take in the tank in? That's not going to happen. Nobody is risking their own troops, their own soldiers for fighting in Ukraine. So this is something which Russians are also watching. And let's see. I hope they change their tactics if they want to achieve something. If they don't, if they continue with the grinding thing, it's going to be years, years. 2024 is not too far. We just yeah. So we are in the middle of a phase where the Russians have to be careful what they commit, because if it has to last long, they have to conserve their troops. They have to conserve their equipment. Their defense industry production line has to reduce enough. So all these things, when you consider, they're more of a grinding thing. I don't think any offensive coming in. Yeah,
Three big grinders and continue on. Whoever comes gets stuck in the middle, chalte raho.
yeah,
So, the interesting part about this war is that this war has not been fought as much on the battlefield as per se. I mean, you've not had major offenses as we just spoke. We've not had heavy air raids and this. There are missile strikes and all that stuff happens. But generally speaking, it's a very low graded war. The high grade war has been played in the battle of narratives, and that's the interesting part to me, because the Western narrative against Russia has been, they've ranged it from being deranged to Soviet style to personal wars to a whole lot of things. And then comes this Nord Stream event where it impacted two countries, one including a NATO part player. How do you see the world looking at all this stuff? Especially the Nord Stream incident, and
yeah.
with the report of Seymour Hersh that came out. How do you see this thing?
You see, the world is not naive. The moment Nord Stream happened, what came to your mind? You just tell me frankly.
I said Ku Bono, so I put a video out and I said it's these guys who blew it up. That's it.
Yeah. So the very fact that the first thought that came into your head was it's not the Russians.
Yeah. Why would
And
they, sir?
and any huh?
Why would they? Am
Any
I going to break my own car? No.
yeah. So this didn't make sense the moment you started pointing fingers at the Russians. Somebody who's putting, I mean, put in money, somebody who's putting a lot of efforts to lay this pipeline, why would it want to destroy it? If I had to just shut this, I would just have to shut the valve. I didn't have to destroy the pipe. After all, any pipeline, the flow of gas is just to be shut with a valve.
Yep.
I just close it. Thank you very much. No more gas for you. I don't go around destroying it. So, why I'm saying this is the world is not naive. Anybody who's got some gray matter between the ears does understand that this was always uh, the doing of not the Russians but somebody else. And today you have a lot of theories coming in, and revelations that this the it was already thought of, and it was already, even that the Brits had carried out an exercise. They had already planted the explosives in a bit to blow it up, and things like that. So, as you said, it's a battle of narratives. Narrative being condemn Russia, lower the deputinize or removal of Putin. As it is, we know that the Russians' economy is not been strong. Further weaken it, play with the minds of the people, of the Russian people, so that the Russians themselves are demoralized, and all that. Just, I'm going to take you back to what I started with. The actual narrative was not coming out. The actual, in my opinion, in my opinion, the actual narrative was not coming out. Americans losing hold on European soil, Europeans getting on loggerheads with the Americans, saying, "Thank you very much. We don't need you anymore. We need to defend ourselves." So now, to continue to have that particular hold and continue to have relevance of NATO, and you have this narrative coming about, anti-Russian narrative. And these guys just scapegoats. The Ukrainians have fallen for it. I'm sorry, President Zelensky has fallen into a trap without understanding the game, and that's my reading. I may be very wrong, but in my opinion, absolutely, he's fallen into a trap, and he himself is responsible for so many deaths and so much of destruction. Who wants destruction? I mean, he's asking for more weapons. I mean, he is not worried about the lives of the Ukrainians. We will die to the end. Americans want them to die they will fight in Ukraine till the last Ukrainian. I mean, are you here on eliminating a particular country, the people of that country? I think this narrative, the counter narrative, also has to be seen and has to be studied. And sane people must come up to saying, stop the war, stop killing people. What happens in a war? You fight. It's not finders keepers. It's not area captured, retained. You have an issue, you fight. You have a ceasefire. Then you withdraw. And then you go back to agreed lines. That's what happens. India, Pakistan. Haven't we returned so much of territory back? Indo-Pak wars, 65, 71. We returned captured territories. Haven't we? So that's how ceasefires take place. That's how you go back to original lines. This doesn't seem to be the case here. This seems to be get the last Ukrainian killed. Seems to be the motto. And that's a very sad state. And unfortunately, the United Nations also is talking about providing all kinds of support to the Ukrainian people because they've been displaced. Nobody's talking of bringing the war to an end. Nobody's talking about it. It's our prime minister who has spoken to the Russian president and told him this is not an era of war. If you tell me any other country which has spoken like that. So there has to be, there is something amiss here. And unfortunately, you keep supplying weapons and you're supplying. I have some figures. I mean, I just want to take some figures and just give it to you as to how much of equipment has been provided by. Let me just. So when you look at these figures, you will be amazed as to how much of arsenal has been provided. Artillery pieces provided to Ukraine, 512 by USA, France, and UK, and others. MLRS, 116. The armored flight vehicles, that's the armed drones, 3,550. USA has provided 2,348 and rest of by the others. Till now, 389 tanks have been given, of which Poland has provided 260 tanks. Czech Republic 93, Slovenia 28, and the others 8. So as far as provisioning of tanks, Poland is the main supplier of tanks to date. Now, if this is the kind of, I mean, I can provide it to you, but I need to man that, right? I need to be trained how to use it. I need to be trained how to fight with it. I need the crew for it. I need commanders who use their mind, who use their brains. I mean, you can have all the firepower and you do not know how to use it. This seems to be, I've got a rocket, so I must fire it. The Americans would provide them the intelligence through satellite and give you six figure, eight figure, 10 figure, and then you feed it into the system fires. And that's what is happening exactly. So there are no, planning. There is no campaign which has been evolved on either side. I would put it that way. Though they say that the Russians were coming in from the north and supposed to have come in from Belarus, Kiev, and then they went back. Obviously, they did that because they found it was not working out. But I think there is a lag of, or say, lack of understanding of the art of war, if I may just put it, on both sides. Yeah.
I mean, the Russians, I don't know. I mean, everybody seems to, as you said, everybody planned or looked at Russia and said they're going to come in with a big hammer, and they didn't. So I guess that's what everybody said. "Yaar, ye kya kar raha hai? Why is he taking so much time?" And this
No.
and that. But, when you look at American wars, 20 years they sit in a country, and these are the
Yeah,
same
this
people
just
that are judging slower tactics of Russia. So it doesn't make sense to me at all.
you see, it's Afghanistan was 20 years, right?
Yeah.
This is only 1 year, 1 year down, if I may just put it this way. There were 20 years and they left after 20 years. This is 1 year, the first year. And it's not good, and it's not a fight which is going to end so fast. You see, the Americans per se will only contribute that much as their defense industry can support. And unfortunately, the defense industries run out of most of the ammunition. Their production lines are as stretched. They've had to import ammunition from Pakistan, right? If you're, I don't know whether you're aware or not, but Pakistan been supplying weapons
As a matter of
to
fact, I
Ukraine.
broke the story in October, sir.
Yeah,
122 millimeter ammunition.
yes, because Pakistan has a good, ammunition manufacturing industrial base. Well, they're good at that, and they have done that. It provides ammunition to America as well. So their defense production lines are stretched. And
Mm.
as I said, they are not going to give anything which is frontline. We've got Taiwan, you know, on the other side, Indo-Pacific. I mean, the worry lies there. This is just a war of not losing relevance in Europe. The main battle lies there. The main thinking is towards the Pacific, Indo-Pacific. So the worries are different. I and after the Afghanistan experience, they are not going to commit troops anywhere.
No.
No ways. And ideally so. The public is also at large in the United States very annoyed. Why are we fighting other people's wars? You see, for the US to give money is very easy. They just have to print dollars. I just have to, print dollars and give it to you. Nothing goes from my pocket when I give dollars to you. I got a production line ready. And then I found read about it or saw it on someone's talk and made a lot of sense. He said, the Americans, for them, if I'm saying I'm providing you this much billion of aid, the US just has to print dollars and give it to you. If any other country has to give that much of aid in dollar terms, My friend, he has to take it out from somewhere and give it. So, when you look at the aid being provided to the US, you got to look at it in a different perspective. And the Americans actually have their hands full as far as Taiwan is concerned. They're greatly worried that the Chinese are teamed up with the Russians. That is also a cause of worry. And then we have the Iranians getting in, and tomorrow the North Koreans. So if the anti-US lobby bodies they gang up and support Russia, well, it's not going to be easy. It's not
It's a
going to
big
be easy.
problem.
Yeah, it's a major problem.
So, which brings me to actually my next question. You spoke about the weapons, and America has this dirty habit of leaving whatever it came with in the country that it's fighting or fighting for, fighting with, same case and scenario. Uh, Vietnam, I mean, I know of incidents where the Vietnamese literally went under the ocean, picked out those Huey helicopters, brought them out, dried them up, and started to use them for another 30 years after that. Uh, Afghanistan, billions have been left. Ukraine on the books, 29 billion. Uh, I have no idea how much else is gone because there were reports about some captured Iranian weapons which are on its way to
Yes.
Ukraine now. So my question is, sir, is this going to be Ukraine or are we looking at Ukrainistan?
Well, let's not look at Ukrainistan. Look at Europistan. My friend, Ukraine is where does even today, if you start accounting for what has gone in and where it is, you will not find that you'll not be able to account for it. So you have a major problem here where the weapons, even now, my fear is, I have nothing authenticate and I haven't read it, but I'm just talking about. It's my fear that even today the weapons are would be getting diverted elsewhere, and you don't know where. Is this a front? If there are so many mercenaries which are operating there, and so many of these groups which are fighting there, uh, where are the weapons? Where are they getting the weapons from? So these weapons are going to get back into society.
Yeah.
The white supremacists which are there in Europe, I'm afraid whether it goes into their hands or whether it goes into the hands of the Islamists who are there, I do not know. But Europe is definitely in deep trouble. So let's just not look at Ukraine. Look at Germany. You look at Poland. You look at anything in you look at Hungary. And if the the backflow takes place, which is bound to happen, and which I'm sure is happening even today, we have a serious problem. Europe has a serious problem. I would just put it that way. So it's just not Ukraine.
I think it's going to be the world, sir, because this kind of weapons going across, for lack of a better word, it's psychotic. I mean, just dump
Absolutely.
weapons.
And as it is,
Today, interestingly, sir, in the morning, there was a statement by General Zelensky, who's the chief of the army staff or chief of general staff of Ukraine. He said, "We fear that the Europeans are keeping a certain segment of the weapons for themselves, before sending them to Ukraine. So we would like to send a team to all European nations to investigate that." And I
so I told
was
you,
fantastic. I mean, here is a
so
guy who's literally begging for everything, and he's blaming the people that are giving that you're stealing from me. I,
so see the thing is that there is a lot of distrust which is building up slowly over a period of time. Promises versus deliverance, promises versus selfishness, self interests, I would say national interests coming before Ukraine, you know. So
Mm.
these kind of things are bound to happen. I mean, as I said, which same country is going to provide everything? I mean, Poland's given 260 tanks. Hats off to them that they've done it. And Poland, I know Poland. I've been there. I've seen their weapons and I've seen their systems. Uh, they're quite a professional. A lot of people there. So and even when I was there, they were being trained by the United States, and they were proudly talking about it. But that's a regular thing as far as NATO is concerned. You know, the trainings and things like that. But self-interest, the national interest comes first for everybody. So these acquisitions may be well be true, and 100% is not going to go into, definitely not going to Ukraine. There has to be a cut, which I, in today's world, that would be kept aside for use later, subsequently, when it comes to, when the enemy comes knocking at my doors, I also need to have something.
Oh, yes, as a
And
matter of fact, there are these obscure channels on YouTube where I was watching a mercenary interview. He had his face covered and all that stuff, and he came back to Australia, I believe. And he said, we were trying to mount an attack towards a region towards Kharkiv, and we had some anti-tank missiles and this and that, and our commander was there. He said, when we engaged them, when we called for the weapons, they said the truck got lost. Khatam.
absolutely.
And this is
Khatam.
there on YouTube. I mean, there's a guy called Willie OAM,
Mhm.
whose channel it is. He's got brain tumor, this guy, and he runs this channel and he keeps talking to these mercenaries who come back, and they tell horror stories.
Yeah, the mercenaries. You see, I I was very amazed at these mercenaries who went in. Now, who are these mercenaries again? Why were they there? They were there for the money.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
I mean, I read somewhere they're being paid $700 per day to fight in Ukraine
Wow.
per day. You throw that option to anybody in the world that you're going to get 700 US dollars. Only thing is you're going to fight, and if you survive, your family is, you're a big shot. 700 US dollars a day, and that's I'm talking about in the beginning of the war, and I'm talking about it good 10, 11 months back. So that's how they went. Anybody would pick up a weapon for 700 USD a day. Yeah. And
Amazing.
today, now I want to ask how many mercenaries are there today? Today they're picking up 14-year-old kids.
Yeah.
I mean, in Ukraine, 14-year-old kids are fighting. When we talk of child soldiers and things like that. Today, 14-year-old children are being made to fight in Ukraine, and nobody's talking about child soldiers. The UN is not crying horse, and that is sad.
Absolutely. And the way they pick them up on the streets and all
Instead
that
of
stuff.
bringing the war to an end, we are supplying. Yeah.
Sir, coming to towards the end of this wonderful discussion, I want to ask you one larger picture question. Now, whatever the Russians do and whatever the outcome is going to be positive to Russia because they've already captured 20%. Even if they say, okay, enough, they've still taken a large chunk of the country. They've destroyed their military to a large extent. Uh, Infrastructure is damaged. Whole lot of bad things have happened to Ukraine. On top of it, you've yourself told us that the Western capacity of war fighting has reduced. Their production is not going to be able to come up. It's going to take them years before they come to the strength. So the Russian threat, as per se, is going to be minimal for the next some time. What do you think is going to be the impact of a Russian victory? I mean, outright victory, as again you explained, is not going to happen. But a Russian edge over the situation, impact on NATO, EU, and just the balance within the West.
Yeah, very good question, and that is what actually we should be trying to crystal graze as to what exactly is going to happen. As I see it, Russia is whatever gains are. That fact remains, it has gained territory. If it can, if it achieves its war aims, and which, in my opinion, in the first phase would be the Donbas region, coming down south, and Odessa and the port around and the Black Sea, and
Yes.
coverage over the, I mean, that belt over the Black Sea. If I can do, if they are able to achieve that, I think they would put a stop at that particular stage. Before that, doesn't make sense for them. Uh, Strategically, tactically, operationally, whichever way, this is the bare minimum they would wish to achieve. After they have achieved this, then we can, yes, then the bigger question comes. The bigger question comes, once achieved, Russia is going to put a stop to it. It's going to halt its operations. It's going to consolidate. It will rebuild its part, invite people to come over, return back, and then try and resume normal life. So that's a situation. But what happens to the geopolitics and the geostrategic structure? NATO has been revived. The revival of NATO has taken place. NATO tomorrow has to start thinking again as to how they need to counterbalance Russia. They will be wary of Russia resuming its operations at a later stage, and they will be better prepared at that. Ukraine would have joined NATO in this particular stage, if I look forward, because after all this, if Ukraine is not brought into the NATO fold, then I think the West has failed Ukraine or the Ukrainian people. They would have failed them. I mean, if they cannot absorb Ukraine into NATO, and you have failed, you haven't done it. So it is a given that after the end of the war, or after the first phase of the war is over, Ukraine should definitely get absorbed into NATO. So the dream of EU becoming independent of America is over. American dependence will remain. Now, what would happen, as we discussed, is that uh, these white supremacists, this Islamists, you may find a different kind of what do you call insurgency, or a movement taking place because of the availability of weapons,
Mm.
which may come about, and that which will trouble the rest of Europe. That will happen. Britain, which is the Brexit part of it, Britain will have to start thinking again. We'll have to give a serious thought to be a part of, get back into the EU fold, or will its ego, get hurt? Is a question we got to keep watching. China and Russia will get closer, and if they collaborate in the front lines, then you definitely have a problem.
Big problem.
Then you have a major problem when the Chinese influence comes along on the borders of Ukraine or into the captured areas. You have the Chinese coming and rebuilding uh, you know, the infrastructure in Ukraine. So you willy nilly you got the Chinese which have stepped in. So there you have a problem. So we will see changing dynamics.
Yeah,
You will see the art. You will see the dynamics spilling over into the Arctic region. Nobody's giving it a thought. Arctic is the next area where you got to be looking at.
yeah,
That is where the Russians are, focusing on. That is where the Scandinavian countries are focusing on. So the Arctic is what you got to be looking at. Exploitation of the Arctic. So dynamic. Its situation is going to be totally different as we see. It may be the other way around also.
hmm?
The Americans may say, "Thank you very much, Europe. You look after yourself. I've got a greater worry. I've got to look after China.
Yeah,
Yeah, you come up with your defense forces. I will support you." And far fetched though, but then that's a scenario when they say, "Okay, fine, NATO less US." Doesn't make sense, but that's a far fetched scenario where the American people themselves turn around and say, "Why are we interfering in Europe and why are we bothered about Europe? Let's worry about China." So the geostrategic environment is definitely going to change, and India, of course, is emerging. You know, we are emerging all powerful. Let's get it. Let's get it right. And I think we were the best set of. Our polity is doing a tremendous job. Our foreign minister is, I think, one of the best that we've ever had. So, as Indians, we understand geopolitics, we understand geostrategy, and I think geoeconomics. All has been very, very well catered for. We will have to take a side, stroke, stay non-aligned in Cold War 2.0. So we will have to build a set of our own partners who support us and who are with us. And we'll have quite a few, incidentally.
absolutely, yes, sir.
That is,
Yes, by the looks of the way things are going around, it looks like we're not
yes.
alone, if I may.
We are not alone.
Yeah.
We're gathering a lot of moss. We're gathering a lot of this.
One
Yeah,
thing that you brought out from this interview that I'd like to sum up with, sir, we've had these wars in the region uh, very close to India, war on terror, and it was termed to have changed the world. But actually, I think the Ukraine war will change the world. It has already to a large extent, and as this thing goes forward, the great power battle will kind of open out even further, and that's something we are seeing happening with Anthony Blinken in the European security dialogue. Munich security dialogue says that we now suspect Chinese are just on the brink of supplying to Russia. So this war is indeed changing the world. And sir, thanks so much for bringing out a perspective, because we as Indians, we've normally been isolationists, where we say, "Yeah, not my monkey, not my circus." You know,
absolutely.
जो होता है होते रहो. That still should be the attitude, but we need to still keep a track and learn from what is happening around wherever we can and kind of understand. And for that, sir, thank you so much for helping us, put out a very interesting and new perspective. I don't think it's been talked about within India. So let's see what the comments come out, and we can probably address it the next time that we do a show with you on Dev Talks. Till then, sir, Jai Hind.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Take care.